Yeah, of course. Just while people are leaving, if you don't have any paper, I'm going to ask that you take one of these sheets for an activity. So, if you don't have any paper yet. If you don't have any paper, sorry, Kelsey, you need one?
Yeah, no. You got me on the little window.
Driving past what? I did. It's fine. Don't worry about it. All right. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all, and some I know, and you're familiar with me. But I'm Kira McGilvery. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also the Chief Program Officer of School-Based Initiatives at Children and Families First, which, if you're not familiar with, is a statewide nonprofit here in Delaware. If you're ever looking for any referral resources, we're a great organization to look up. We have a wide range of programs. So why I'm here is I specialize in working with children. I've been trained in many different modalities to work with youth and their families. I also oversee the early childhood behavioral health programs in Kent and Sussex County for Head Start and Early Head Start. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the struggles and concerns you probably all kind of have and deal with, and some of the things that kids experience. So hopefully after this training, you'll kind of learn some more information about how to help kids who have special needs or disabilities or challenging behaviors. So first we're going to start by looking at the developing brain, because I always think this is really helpful to understand what's going on with kids 0 to 5. And then we'll also talk about kind of the brain as teenagers as well. Then we'll look at practices to support student disabilities and challenging behaviors, and then we'll look at techniques to kind of support children and yourself when perhaps you are experiencing those challenging behaviors. All right, I'm going to move over here because I'm going to use my finger a lot. So you're all going to become neuroscientists with me. If you were here last year, some of this may be review. But for a lot of you, I think there's some new faces. So this is a brain cell, all right? This is called a neuron. We have 86 billion neurons when we're born. It's the most we'll ever have. And to give you kind of what does that look like, it's as many stars as that are in the Milky Way, okay? So that's how many brain cells we have. These are called dendrites, and dendrites are part of the cell that receive messages from other cells. So kind of hold on to all this. We're going to put it together. This is an axon, and this axon is what is part of the cell that sends it to another cell. So dendrites receive, and axons send it to another cell. Eventually, we all get something called myelin sheath. Myelin sheath is insulation to help the message move more quickly. So think about any wires you have. I'll use this one. It has this like rubber insulation over the wiring. You don't just see the wiring. It's there because it actually helps the electricity move more quickly. All right? Hold on to all this. Okay, so you all have literally the most important job in a kid's life, as well as their parents, because you are seeing kids 0 to 5, and then for the youth center, you're working with youth, teenagers, and I'll talk about why that's really important. So, what you see are these like little black dots, like you left a pen ink on the paper too long. Those are your cells. All those little branches and connections are those dendrites and axons. What do you notice between 36 weeks gestation and 2 years? Do you notice more cells or the connections? Huh? More connections, yes. That is why you all have the most important role. We form the most synapses or connections between 0 to 5 years of age. So you, the experiences you provide kids, the interactions you have, the interactions their parents have, is literally setting the foundation and the architecture of the brain for that kid's rest of their life. That's why you all have such an important role. So, what ends up happening is at 4 years of age, kids end up going through something called pruning. And if you have ever gardened, you know what pruning is. You start to get rid of the connections you no longer need, or the buds that are dead, so all the energy can go towards the ones that we need. So, when babies know how to say more, but at 4 and 5, they're not using more anymore, all done, that's a connection that's pruned away because they know how to verbally speak what they need. Then, at age 6, so after they've left the CDC, they start to go through myelination. And this is where kids get that myelin sheath. So before age 6, they don't have this myelin sheath, that insulation that allows things to move more quickly. So why this is important is because the 4-year-old, the 3-year-old, the 5-year-old, they'll be able to show some form of impulse control. They're not going to bite all the time. They're not going to hit all the time, scream, run away. But it's not till they get that myelin sheath that they're able to do it consistently on a regular basis. They're able to do it more efficiently. And again, that's after they've left. It's also why the 3-year-old is going to have a lot more difficulty doing what the 5-year-old is going to do as well. And then when we think about kids who have disabilities or special needs, their neurodevelopmental timeline looks quite different than this as well. And so it's really important when we're thinking about developmentally appropriate practices to think about what's happening in the brain and how kids who are undergoing stress or have a special need, it might look a whole lot different. And we'll talk about practices to help. So we're going to do an activity so you guys can understand what this myelination kind of looks like. So I want everyone on a sheet of paper, a sticky note for this one, not your big piece of paper. I want you to just write your first and last name. Okay, thank you.
My dear.
That'll be helpful later on. All right, did everyone write their name? Was that easy? How many times have you written your name? I don't know, a billion times. I don't know what that's about. But a lot. Now I want you to switch hands and write with your non-dominant hand.
Looks like my yeah, but look at my looks like a horse.
I have 2.
All right, I think most are done. How is that? Not good? Did it take you longer? You were more quiet, I would say. Were you more focused? Does it look like a toddler wrote it?
Yeah.
That is an example of how our brain works. You have a myelin sheath over your dominant hand, and you know how to write that super quick. That pathway is well developed. What isn't well developed is writing with your non-dominant hand. Yes, you can do it, but it doesn't look pretty. It takes a lot of focus, and that's kind of what's happening in a kid's brain 0 to 5. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't do it. Sometimes you have to repeat yourself over and over again, and it's frustrating and it's annoying, but that's kind of why it's happening. All right, so we're going to talk about the brain, and I'm going to use my hand for this. So really kind of important in understanding not only kind of why kids act the way they do. So we have what's called a downstairs brain and an upstairs brain. Our downstairs brain is our oldest, most primitive part of our brain. It is with us from birth. It consists of our brain stem, so if you're looking, it would be, my wrist. Your brain stem is in charge of your most basic functions: breathing, heart rate, reproduction, digestion, blinking, everything happening at this unconscious level. Then we move into what's called the limbic region of our brain, and our limbic region of our brain controls our very intense emotions: fear, anger, love, excitement. And then also within our downstairs brain is something called our amygdala, and our amygdala is a little almond-shaped piece of our brain, and it is our smoke alarm. It alerts us to life-threatening situations around us. And so hold on to that. Then we have our upstairs brain. Our upstairs brain is our human brain. It's what separates us from other mammals. It is our rational, logical, decision-making brain. It's in charge of planning and imagining, weighing pros and cons. The ability to have empathy and trust and connection is all in your upstairs brain. Specifically, there's something in our upstairs brain called the medial prefrontal cortex, and I don't expect you to remember that, but we'll call it the watchtower. It's located right here if you were looking at yourself in the mirror. And your watchtower actually regulates the downstairs brain. So when your brain's working well and all together, it looks like this. But sometimes when a potentially stressful situation happens, your amygdala sounds the alarm and it blocks connections to the upstairs brain. It really actually hijacks the upstairs brain so that you can't use those skills. So I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like. You all drove here today, or you've been driving before. I'm assuming you've all been in a car. Has anyone had that experience of almost getting into a car accident?
Yeah.
It didn't happen, but you almost got into one. You might have noticed your heart started pumping really quickly. Maybe you tightened up on the steering wheel. Maybe you cursed, gave the middle finger, something. You were probably scared and angry. And why that happens is because your downstairs brain sounds the alarm, and so your very strong emotions and your fight, flight, or freeze response, we call it, comes off, and you react to whatever this situation is. But there was no accident. So what happens? Your upstairs brain says, "Wow, amygdala, everything's fine," and you go back to your day. You don't think about it until I ask you right now. However, if you were to get into a car accident 2 weeks ago, your car was totaled, and then someone swerves into your lane, and you think there's about to be an accident, well, this time, yes, the amygdala sounds the alarm, your heart starts pumping, all those same bodily reactions happen. But this time, your upstairs brain says, "Whoa, driving's really scary, and it might take a lot longer for you to be able to regulate yourself back down. But because you're all adults, you know some breathing techniques, you're able to regulate yourself back down." Why this is important is because our kids' brains are under construction. They are born with their downstairs brain. Our upstairs brain doesn't come online until around ages 3 years old. So any kid under 3 doesn't have those upstairs brain capabilities. So I like to think of it of like an organization. There's research and development, and they're just coming up with all these crazy ideas, and they're getting hurt, and they're spending all the money because there's no CEO on top to be like, "That's not a good idea, let's not spend all our money towards this." And so kids rely on us, their caregivers, whoever that may be, you all, their parents, to help regulate them, to be their upstairs brain when things are chaotic or when they're experiencing really strong emotions, because their downstairs brain is so strong, and it'll be strong for a very long time. And so they really rely on us to show them that co-regulation that they need, to be that kind of CEO for them. And so this is a way to kind of look at how the brain develops. Like I said, we kind of develop from bottom up, so it's brain stem to cortex. And just to reiterate how important you all have is the plasticity. We call our brain it's like plastic. It's malleable. You learn new things, new hobbies, we can change. But it's much harder to change downstairs things than upstairs. So it's very hard to change the foundation or structure of a home. It's a lot of money, it's a lot of work. It's much more easier to change decor. It's still a pain, but it's much more easy. So again, why you have such an important role in these kids' lives. The early years are the most important years. And I wanted to say for all you youth center folks, the pruning stage for teens is puberty, 11 to 12 years. So that's when youth start to really prune away all their old connections as well, and they go through a heightened sense of myelination after that. All right, I'm not going to go into this. This is just some of the other things our prefrontal cortex does, and I went over that already. All right, so looking at student disabilities and challenges. Every child is on their own neurodevelopmental timeline. We know that there are some things that we should expect, but really every child is unique. And so student disabilities or challenges are any behavioral, physical, emotional, or learning difficulties that require specialized accommodations. I think many of us in education are aware of ADHD and autism. We hear about that a lot. I also want to touch on anxiety and depression. So we know that young kids can have anxiety, social anxieties, or just more kind of generalized anxiety, and separation anxiety from their family member. We also know that kids very early on can experience depression. There's been research that kids as young as 5 have suicidal ideation. So you could have kids who are experiencing some form of anxiety or depression in your classroom that would require more specialized accommodations. We also know that there's learning disabilities like dyslexia, for example. There's medical concerns. So, you know, I see all the little pictures posted. Many kids might have asthma, allergies. They could have cancer. They could have other things that are impacting how they show up into the classroom. Parental separation. Divorce is very hard on a child. It might be common, but what we know is that divorce very much impacts a child's well-being. Also, we're thinking about military. We have a lot of individuals who might deploy. That is very traumatic for a child, very stressful, and it will impact their well-being and possibly, again, how they are in the classroom. There's also physical differences. So an individual may look different, may have a body part that is extra or perhaps not there, and that will, again, require some more specialized thinking about how we address. And then there's sensory processing disorder. I feel like this one's often not discussed. It's usually talked about in occupational therapy, but a lot of kids have sensory processing disorders that go undiagnosed. So a sensory processing disorder is something related to the senses. So example, a picky eater, a child who might have difficulty with different textures. So this might look like the kid who's constantly playing with their food or flinging it around. Or why is this kid always at breakfast, snack, or lunch, always kind of behaviors start to act up? That could be a sign that there is some sort of texture sensory disorder. There's also kids who are really sensitive to loud noises, and that might trigger some of their behaviors. Also, there are kids who like a lot of touch. So they might have something along feeling where they like really big movements, they like to bump into things, and it doesn't seem to bother them. That might be a sensory processing disorder around touch. Then we have speech and language disorders that might look like stuttering. And then I'll just say trauma exposure as well. You never know what's happening at home. There could be child abuse, domestic violence. A parent could have substance use, and that will obviously impact the child and their well-being. So we'll talk about what we can do. So we have what's called universal practices. Universal practices are something that support all students. So they're supporting all students in your classroom as well as students who have special needs or disabilities. And what we know about universal practices when we have these is they improve academic, social, emotional, and behavioral outcomes. They tend to reduce exclusionary and more reactive discipline. And they just focus on more responsive measures and practices. So we're going to do an activity for us to kind of why universal practices are helpful. And I need my little cheat sheet here. No one look. You're going to want your paper out. All right, so you're going to follow my instructions. You cannot ask me any questions. I will not repeat myself, so you're going to have to listen. Hopefully no one's talking around you. And we are going to draw a bug.
A what?
A bug. That's the only time I'm going to repeat myself. All right, so this bug is round. This bug has 8 legs. They are paired in groups of 2, 4 on each side, and 1 leg is longer than the other. It's meant to be hard, though. I'm not judging you. All right, on each leg, there are 2 feelers, one that is longer than the other. The bug has 2 round eyes at the top of its head. The bug has 2 squiggly antennas coming from the top of its head. The bug has 2 pea pod shaped wings. All right, the bug has 1 dot next to each wing. The bug has a round mouth between its eyes.
You didn't tell me leave spaces for mouth. What's going on there?
The bug has a triangular stinger at the bottom of its body.
I can't read that because I didn't read it.
And finally, the bug has 5 square eggs to the left of the stinger. Square. All right, let me all see your bugs. Let's see the bugs. Wait, I don't want. Oh, I was the bug. All right, you can put your bugs down. I didn't say. So, why do you think your bug doesn't look the same as mine?
Because that's how we interpret it.
Okay, so how you interpreted what I told you verbally. What else?
The way our mind was processing it.
Mind processing, the way you saw it. Some of you I heard said, what is a pea pod shaped thing? So what does that even look like? Anything else? What could have been helpful? How do you think we could have had the same picture? Having a reference. Having a reference, so explain better, maybe go into more detail.
Repeat yourself.
Repeat myself. Ask questions. A visual, yes, a visual of what it might look like that you're drawing.
More hands-on, being like, that's not what I meant.
Yes, more hands-on, kind of redirecting you.
I said it was perfect.
All right, good job, everyone. All right, so this is why universal practices are helpful, because every child, like I said, are on their own neurodevelopmental timeline. Each child is unique. They have their own experiences at home, their own cultures, their own understanding of the way they perceive the world. And so we have to kind of be attuned to that. And universal practices like having visual aids and tactile supports and all those things actually help kids succeed. They let them be less frustrated. So We're going to go over the top 10 universal practices to support and respond to social, emotional, behavioral needs and needs of kids with disabilities. So first, we want to think of the physical environment. Are there visual, like I said, visual things for them to see? Pictures? Is it in words as well? Can a kid move around your classroom freely? So if you have a kid who's in a wheelchair, on crutches, anything, are they able to access all parts of your room? We also want to think about predictable classroom schedules. And I've seen the schedule, so I know you guys have them. But why that's important is because kids who have anxiety, who have any kind of perhaps traumatic exposure, they do better with predictable schedules so they know what to expect. And so being able to kind of know what they have next is really helpful. Eventually kids need less prompts, but really kids need this. And I would say they need it visually as well as written down. We also want 3 to 5 positive classroom expectations. Now this is more for our preschool classrooms. This could also be for the youth center. But you want kids to collaboratively discuss what the expectations for the classroom are going to be, because they then feel more like they have a voice in it, they're more empowered. And so coming up with, okay, as a classroom, what are we going to decide is important to us? Is it to be kind and respectful, and what does that look like? And then reminding the class of those expectations every day, making it a huge part of what your classroom looks like and how you teach and respond. Then we want to talk about active engagement. So kids who perhaps have ADHD, for example, but just any kids in general, this is why it's a universal all practice, they're going to stay more engaged if we are engaging them in what we're doing by asking questions, being more hands-on, and soliciting what they think about whatever it is that we are teaching them. And then we want to think about prompts. From when a child enters the classroom, we want to prompt them about what they can expect in this class. Maybe it's those classroom expectations that we have. It's gentle reminders when perhaps a child is maybe not doing what we would expect of them to do, and prompting them to do it in the way that we're asking. Active supervision, I'm not going to go over that. You guys know what active supervision is. Specific praise. So specific praise. We want to be as specific as possible when we are praising a child. Great job means nothing. We want to say things like, great job at practicing your letters today. I really appreciated your focus. Or, thank you, class, for listening during circle time. I really appreciate how respectful you all were. We want to use that praise. And I'm going to skip the specific corrections first and go to positive to negative. And we need to have that as a 5-to-1 ratio. So for every 1 negative interaction you have with the kiddo, they need 5 positive praises and interactions to combat that 1 negative. And then kids with disabilities, they need 9-to-1. So any kid who has a specific kind of need, they need 9-to-1 positive interactions with you. And then specifically, we want corrections with minimal engagement. So I know this can be hard, and I know you guys have rules and things that I'm not privy to, but I will generally say that any communication is good communication in a kiddo's eyes. Any attention is good attention. It doesn't matter if it's actually kind of you're getting on to them about something. It's because you're paying attention to them. It feels really good to a kiddo. So what you want to try to be mindful of is being specific with whatever correction you're going to do with minimal engagement around it. You want it to be kind of quick and specific. Obviously, if a child is unsafe or something, that's something different. But if it's just a general kind of behavior that they need to be doing more appropriately, we want to make it a quick interaction with them. And then using data can be a really helpful way to see what's working well in a classroom and not. So these are some universal equitable adaptations for kids. Organization is a huge one. When things are disorganized and cluttered, that can be really triggering for kids with disabilities, special needs, and again, any kid in general, they do better when things are clean and organized. We also want to think about calm colors, red and orange. I know there's a lot of things that are red and orange for young kids, but it's actually overstimulating for kids. And so if you have a child who has autism, ADHD, trauma, anxiety, that's gonna push them over the edge. And it's gonna make all your kids a little bit more bouncy. We wanna think about colors like blues and greens and pastels that we are incorporating into the classroom. And then flexible seating. And I understand this might be really hard, but some kids, again, ADHD or someone who has sensory processing disorder, might need other kind of flexible seating to be able to sit in the classroom for the full time. Chairs might be really uncomfortable. Hard chairs might actually trigger them as something that they don't like, or they might need to bounce because they have a lot of energy, and so thinking about ways to incorporate that into the classroom. All right, so this might be hard to see, it's a little blurry, but these are two pictures of classrooms, and I want you, raise your hand so I can hear better, but tell me some things that you like and that you dislike about either, yeah.
I feel like this one has a lot going on and a lot of options for toys.
Okay.
Compared to this one having not too many, but still giving them enough variety of them.
Okay, so which one did you say you like more? This one.
Yeah.
Okay, it's more organized. Okay. Yeah.
I think they go great if you combine them, because you have your area for your cognitive tabletop areas, and you have your area for your gross motor for those.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. What else? Yeah.
I feel like the colors are a little too much.
Yeah, the colors are, we see those bright oranges, yellows, reds.
There's just a lot going on.
There's just a lot going on.
Yeah.
What? Too busy? So it's too busy for the kids too. Uh-huh.
Bins together.
No, but you want it more organized. What about this space right here? Do you think a kid who maybe has some gross motor difficulty or is in a wheelchair, are they able to get through?
No.
How are the kids on the other one supposed to get their cup?
Right, how are they supposed to get their cubbies? Yeah, no, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Right, how tall are those
And
kids?
on the other one, there's cubbies up there on the wall as well.
Yep, yep. I mean, I think Pasa thinks this is all at a level for kids to reach. So we want to think about giving kids, all kids, the choice to pick out the toys and stuff that they want and to access it without becoming frustrated. There is some good gross motor things in both of these. Anything else?
What is this little thing?
This is a climbing structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the ladder like it's stepping.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of climbing structures, but it is helpful for kids who have a lot of energy. I can see how it would be safety. Anything else? Things you don't like, dislike? All right, so we just want to think about our classrooms in general, and is it accessible for all kids? We also, one way that's really helpful for all kids, and especially kids with any of those special needs or disabilities that I talked about earlier, is having calm corners or cozy cubes. Cozy cubes should have really soft things in them, pillows, things like that. They should also have visual aids to help the kids know what they're supposed to be doing. Like, what are some breathing things? How can I calm down? Big words so that they can, try and understand what we're asking them to do. Sometimes some little activities. Cozy cubes can be really difficult to put into your classroom if kids think they have access to them all the time. They really have to be used intentionally or it will cause more chaos. And if kids aren't taught how to use the cozy corner, then it's really ineffective as well. So if we have cozy corners, we want to be teaching our kids how to use them effectively and what's in there. All right, so those are all universal practices that are going to support all our kiddos. And then we have kids who really need additional specialized accommodations to help them be successful in the classroom, and that's our targeted practices. So targeted practices support students who require additional support, and they're adaptations that are made for the child, not the disability. Kids may have the same label, but disabilities look different from child to child. So we can't assume that because they have the same disability that our response is going to be the same. And targeted practices should still be relatively low effort. They don't require a lot to be successful. So there are ways that we can look at our accommodations to support students who have disabilities. First is through our environment and materials. We want to think about, again, we just talked about the environment, so I won't go into that, but also our materials that we have. Then we want to think about our group activities, our play and peer interactions. So some kids may need a lot more support when they are playing with kids in order for them to be kind of successful in that play. They might take a lot more redirection from us. And then communication with, just in general communication with them and how we verbally speak, our nonverbals as well. We pick up on people's nonverbals very quickly, so do kids. And then we also want to think about families. Families are a huge support system for you. And the more that you can engage with them and have a positive relationship with the parents, the more supportive they're going to be in that classroom for you as well. They want their kids to succeed. And so having regular communication with them, positive and negative, is really helpful. And not negative, but growth. And sometimes what happens, we hear about this a lot with parents, is they only talk to the teacher when something bad happens. And they never get to hear all the positive things. The parents are going to stop listening. That's what ends up happening. And they're not your partner anymore. They are someone who is resistant to what you have to say. So you want that 5 to positive 1 interaction with the parents as well. So inclusion in the classroom. So we use what's called SNAP, skills and strengths, needs, adaptations, and partners. So you want to kind of use the SNAP along with what I just talked about in the last slide, the environment, group, play, communication, and family. So for example, when we're working with a kid, what strengths does this student bring to activities and how can you build upon them? So let's say you're learning counting, and I'm going to use just a scenario that a child has autism. Sometimes kids with autism can get really focused on things that they like and enjoy. And so perhaps you're counting with marbles. I'm just using this random example. But this kid really likes dinosaurs. You could instead, for this kid, have a targeted thing where you're counting with dinosaurs during their learning time instead of whatever other material you use for all the other kids to support them in their learning. It's a simple accommodation that you're making based on their strengths, and you're changing up the materials that you use in the classroom. Needs. What need does the student have and how may they impact the classroom environment and activities? So let's say a kid has really difficulty with fine motor skills. Perhaps you are gluing popsicle sticks to books. Not all the books, but some of the books, and that will help the kid move the pages without the help of the teacher. They'll get less frustrated. They'll be able to engage in the activity like all the other kids. And it was a simple thing that we were able to do. Now, what's important to note about any of these is that they should, for example, the books, you don't want to just make 3 books and only the kid who needs it can use it, because that starts to create stigma, and that can also create other things with kids, like, well, why does that kid have that? And so we want to make it accessible for all kids, but again, we know that it's a more targeted practice for that one specific child who may need it. And then you want to just think about adaptations. What can you adapt and change to access? If someone has a really hard time focusing, well, then you're positioning yourself where you have more eyes on them, that they're possibly more engaged, so maybe they're next to you. If you have a child who is perhaps deaf, you're making sure that you're safe so that they can read your words. We're thinking about how we're even positioning ourselves, knowing where our kids are at and their needs. And then partners. What partners are available to ensure success for the child and classroom? There are a lot of resources here in Delaware. And so reaching out to partners to get ideas of what could be helpful is really support you in the classroom. And I'll go over this. I don't know where I'm at on time. Okay. So I'll just talk a little bit about kind of equitable education and with the brain. And this goes to kids who have disabilities, but also just general. So this is from NACCE. So they have equitable positions for early educators. First is we have to recognize each child's strength and uniqueness, value, family differences, and perspectives. And the brain research shows, like I've said, that every child is unique and on their own timeline. So what practices do? We accommodate a range of developmental capabilities and styles. We think about what is needed for each child. We create large blocks of time to ensure each child can ensure the activity. It's one of the easiest things we can do. Some kids need more time to do an activity, and if you stop their time, that can be a huge trigger of a behavior or a tantrum because they want to finish it. They don't understand that they can get back to it. So we want to think about creating large blocks of time. We want clear boundaries, and we want verbal and printed directions with visual clues. We always want visual schedules and reminders as well. Then when we're thinking about equitable, we want to develop trusting relationships with the child, treat each child with respect, and eliminate language that is stereotypical, exclusionary, or demeaning. The brain research shows that very early on, kids are developing their early and implicit biases. We all have biases, you can't get rid of them, but you can be more knowledgeable about them and start to change them. Kids start developing them at a very early age. So what do? We embrace different cultural experiences and different ethnicities and cultures. What books do you have in your classroom? Are they representative of families who may look different than normal families? Are there books that have a kid who's adopted, of parents with the same sex? Those are things you want to think about that help a kid see themselves in the classroom. You want to think about the cultural and linguistic approaches of the learning environment. This really goes back to engaging kids. In order for kids to learn, they really need to kind of be engaged in that process. And then you want to promote a child's agency. Our downstairs brain, that amygdala, sounds the alarm when we don't have what we call like choice and context. If we don't understand what's going on, or we don't feel we have a lot of choice, it starts to get really aggravated. So we always want to think about ways that we can give kids choices. You know, do you want the red shirt or the blue shirt? If I just say wear the red shirt, that's probably gonna, maybe they don't want to wear the red shirt. We want to try and give the options. And then having the quiet space and a more active area for kids. And so questions just to kind of ask yourself when you're thinking about your classroom is, are there different types of families represented? Do assignments consider different families? Are they relevant to different cultural backgrounds? And are you engaging all learning styles? Visual, auditory, kinesthetic, verbal, logical. Every single kid is going to learn different ways, and so incorporating little pieces of it is very helpful for all children. And then I'll just say all cultures play. Not all cultures play the same way. Your kids are going to play differently. In general, boys tend to roughhouse more. It's not anything wrong with the kid. It's not bad kid. That's tend to what they and how they interact and learn. Also, just thinking about multicultural play in your classroom. Again, kids learn through play, and so you want to think about what materials do I have. We tend to think of, I always say pots and pans. We have pots and pans in our kitchen, but we have blocks and chopsticks for kids who maybe use that at home, because then they can't see themselves in the classroom. And I understand there's funding and things like that, but just things to consider what are helpful for kids of different cultural backgrounds as well than traditional Western norm. And then just praise. We said we want 5-to-1 positive interactions with them. Praise should be very focused, and we want to focus. We want to try and catch them all the time and doing the things well. The more we can pay attention to that, the more helpful it is for them. We also want to use their name, look at them in the eye, get at or below eye level. Focus on the process, not the outcome. So practicing your letters instead of, you wrote your letter so good. You did a great job practicing your letters today. So it kind of switches like that. Or you did a great job at practicing tying your shoes instead of, you tied your shoes. At the process, not the outcome. And be specific. And then kind of going back to that brain earlier, we developed from the bottom up. When we have a kid who, for some reason, has been triggered, they are kind of in this meltdown mode, they're having a really difficult time regulating their emotion. Remember the brain, we are built the bottom up. So any information comes in like bottom up to our brain. So it has to go all the way through our brainstem, limbic region, up to our cortex. And for kids who are having that tantrum, their brain is not working as it should, and their brain has kind of flipped their lid, like we've all kind of flipped our lid before. And we really have to help calm those downstairs brain parts before we can move into the upstairs. So first we have to regulate. And by regulate, not them first, we have to regulate ourselves first, and we have to take some deep breaths and be able to respond in a way that is going to be helpful. Then we can help regulate the child and doing some breathing and co-regulation. Then we can go to relating. We want to relate with the child first. That's the limbic region part of their brain. Validate their feelings, provide some empathy. You're not saying what they're doing was correct, but you're just trying to regulate with them first, so then you can reason. If you just go straight to reason, that kid is not going to listen. It's going to aggravate them more. And you have to go through that regulate, relate before going to the reason. And then you can say, help me to understand why you bit Johnny, right? But if you just go straight to, why'd you bite Johnny? The kid's not going to take it as much as if you did all these steps. And then I will say any questions, and I'll just leave, before I get to questions, these are resources I think a lot of them you have at your center, but these are really great options. And then these are resources for parents. And I will stop there and see if there's any questions. Yeah. Yeah, the resource you want to. Yeah, go for it.
Miss Cherie said that she has the zones of regulation.
Great book. Great way to look at kids.
The others I have with me at the youth center. Y'all can come see me before.
We can just like library.